Hey David, or Mr. Ehrlich. We don't know each other, but I follow you on Letterboxd. Yeah, best friends type shit. Anyways, some time ago you entered a review of Wicked, a few days before the movie was released to regular civilians like me. And honestly, I was like, what the hell, David? Not only did you give it 1.5 stars, but also you gave us like none of your thoughts about it. After I watched the film myself, as the credits rolled, I stayed in my seat for a bit. Needed to take a few deep breaths and go on Letterboxd and see what the internet had to say. And I saw your new review. Still 1.5 stars, but not a short funny one this time, no. You gave us what we deserved. A long, serious baby hot off the press, and I dug in, I devoured. But for some reason when I finished reading, I felt even more frustrated. In your review, you talk about 3 things: the movie Wicked and its flaws, why you actually didn't want to review Wicked or its flaws, and the act of hatred as a weapon and how it's been used to gain power in this world. I agreed with each of your criticisms of the film itself, wholeheartedly. For example, I thought your assessment of Cynthia Erivo was very astute in identifying the lack of promise in her character's self-becoming. She's a very powerful performer in this film that cannot be denied. But as an audience member who came in with no predetermined attachments to Erivo herself or the story as a whole, this version of the protagonist felt distant and hard to care about. No doubt a fair amount of responsibility in this regard falls on the shoulders of director John Chu, who doesn't really give room for Elphaba to progress beyond the archetype of being an outcast, who also happens to have unique powers.
I'm not afraid.
You also fairly criticized Chu for the artificially constructed dance numbers.
And right here you'll see parkour artists doing flips and things like that.
The shocking lack of vibrant color. And overall horrific staging for scenes at Shiz University and the big final number, Defying Gravity.
It's the wizard who should be afraid of me.
You don't hold back on Jeff Goldblum and Michelle Yeoh's performances, which I have to agree were completely stunted. In fact, you could say that all of these elements were stunted and diminished by what the movie really is: a tribute to the fans and legacy of Wicked the Broadway musical, which approaches the question of why you didn't actually want to tear apart Wicked. And you go on to answer this question saying that your reaction to Wicked has a lot more to do with other things going on in the world right now, making it so that it can be hard to distinguish between real evil and benign irritants. You call it the first worst thing you saw after the election, thus making you think about the responsibility all of us have over the things we hate and how we choose to express that animus. Entertainment should only be targeted with that kind of energy if the entertainment itself is genuinely evil, and you don't believe Wicked meets that standard. All of which I don't think I necessarily disagree with, but this is where things get confusing. You talk about reverse engineering this decision not to review Wicked, and you state that you feel like we need to be more pointed and emphatic about the things we hate rather than less. But first you said you hated Wicked, you described what you hated about it, and now you're trying to make a concerted effort not to be pointed and emphatic about that hatred. When you say that hatred should be deployed with care and pointed towards the great and powerful men behind the curtain rather than the honest, vulnerable communities who have nowhere to hide, you connect your commentary back to the film, creating a parallel between our politicians and Oz. These analogies that you create within your reviews are something I often admire, creating opportunities for your audience to think critically about the films that you review, but here I found it to fall flat. Something you don't address is the irony that this is the movie that you decided to use to talk about harnessing hatred in useful ways. A movie where hatred is used as a weapon, purposefully directed at its protagonist, Elphaba. A movie that is precisely about the political frustrations that you are talking about. Its themes literally could not map onto your real life concerns any better. And yet, you came away from the film feeling, perhaps, even more frustrated about such things in real life. How then is the movie not in some way responsible? If you really believe hatred is the thing that we need to harness at the men behind the curtain, then I ask you, how? Because as much as many of us have made a concerted effort to feel hatred in our heart of hearts for Trump, Kamala Harris, J.D. Vance, Joe Biden, it certainly has not made a difference in their ability to usurp power in this country. So how? If there really even is a way? I'd argue that the answer can be art. In the same way Elphaba can fight back against Oz with her special powers and identity, so can artists with their creativity and expression. It is my firm belief that Wicked could have been, and arguably should have been, the story to empower and challenge its audience, to make them think about the power of hatred and how that power can be channeled and redirected. And yet you and I, and I'm sure many others, walked away feeling quite the opposite. Which is why I implore you on the matter of protecting this film from your own criticism, a film that swallowed and berated each and every one of us with its never-ending marketing spectacle, a 9-figure film that spent God knows how much more money on top to make sure we as individuals spent our hard-earned money to go see it in theaters, used instead to glorify another money-making scheme that takes over any piece of art when it gains mass popularity. You said to protect the honest and vulnerable communities, and I don't think Wicked falls under that category. In fairness, you've honored and positively reviewed many indie films in this past year, and I'm sure many more positively than I. I don't doubt your commitment to indie cinema at all. In this review, you say that you've never thought of yourself as a hater. I'm the opposite. My friends love to call me a hater, so maybe there's a degree of frustration here on my behalf that is simply just that I feel targeted by your writing as somebody who does do a lot of hating, specifically of films. But when it comes to these massive blockbuster releases, I feel that it is a worthwhile cause to criticize them. With Dune 2, I did so with a video essay that became the most successful video on my channel, and yet I don't think I did that great of a job with my writing. In fact, I found the best description of that film's mediocrity in your review. And actually that's when I started following you on Letterboxd. In the spirit of your review's closing comments, I'd like to say that my goal with this YouTube channel is to continue harnessing both my love and hatred for certain films and coming up with actual evidence for that opinion, as opposed to lazily throwing hatred around on the internet. In that, I look to you for inspiration.